This presentation is really the collective effort of several people. As King Sun says, my guru, Manu Bhaskaran, who's my single biggest influence on the Singapore economy. Behind him, Hao Yi, who's a research fellow at the LKY school. He's put together a very impressive 4-part case study that charts Singapore's economic development. If you have not read it, please go and read it today. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Singapore's economic model, right? Singapore's growth model. And the central argument I'm trying to make is that it's a model that has been largely the same. It hasn't really evolved. It hasn't really been fundamentally rethought, overhauled. It's essentially the same, right? And it's a model that, as I'll go on to explain, that is highly dependent on foreign capital, foreign labor. To a large extent, I would say, it doesn't really promote the growth of indigenous capabilities, doesn't really promote the growth of homegrown, globally competitive Singaporean companies. But nonetheless, it is a successful model. So this was a chart that was put together by the Economist magazine. I'll describe Singapore's economy in 3 distinct, in my mind, distinct phases. The first period is from 1965, when we got independent, to about 1997, just before the Asian financial crisis. So that was about a 30-year period where we had unbroken, extremely rapid growth, right? And very rapid industrialization also. I mean, in that 30-year period, we grew, in a good year, we would grow at an average of 10 to 12%. In a not so good year, we grow at 5 to 6%. And we only had one recession, more or less self-inflicted, in 1985-86. So this was a period of sustained high growth on the backs of foreign multinationals, right? We industrialized, unlike Korea, unlike Taiwan, unlike Japan before that, we industrialized on the backs of multinational corporations, MNCs. So that's what distinguishes from the other East Asian tigers. But it was a very successful model. It solved unemployment in a matter of few years, gave us this gleaming global city that we have today. It brought us, it turned us from a third, as the cliche goes, right, from a third world economy to a first world in a matter of 2 generations, 40 years. If you think about it, very few other economies in the world have done that. Japan was the first to do that, from third world to first in 2 generations, from a developing to developed economy in 2 generations. Korea was the second. Singapore was also in around the same period. So Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong as well, Hong Kong and Taiwan, right? It's quite a unique achievement, and it's not been repeated anywhere else in Southeast Asia. It's not been repeated, certainly not in Latin America, nor in Africa or South Asia. So that's the first period, 1965 to around Asian financial crisis in 97. A period of rapid industrialization, continuous unbroken growth, just one recession. Then there's a period from 97 to around 2012, where Singapore still managed to sustain very high growth, especially for an economy that is already industrialized, that is already developed. Right? We were growing at an average of about 6%. Very impressive for an economy. From 97 onwards, after 97, we were an economy already above 30,000 or close to 30,000 US dollars per capita. So already a developed economy, but still growing at 5 to 6%. Incidentally, I should mention that in the first 30-year period, our record of growth very much mirrors, or is very much similar to what China has experienced in the last 35 years, right, since its opening. So same processes of industrialization, same processes of mobilizing the entire labor force, cities and into industries. Okay, so the second period, 97 to 2012, still relatively high growth that is both more volatile and more unequal. So between 97 and 2012, we had more negative shocks in that period, in that 15-year period, more negative shocks than in the 30 years before 97, right, in the first growth period. So this was growth that was, so we had obviously the Asian financial crisis, the burst of the dot-com bubble, SARS, and of course then the global financial crisis. So if you think about all those shocks, the fact that we still managed to eke out 5 to 6% growth on average is extremely impressive. But it was also growth so time when we were already a highly developed economy, in spite of all the shocks and negative and the recessions, we were still growing on average about 5 to 6%. So what do you think was driving all that growth? I mean, it seems almost miraculous, right? Growth that was largely driven by foreign labor. So it was not TFP. TFP is the way economists make you all feel small, right? TFP is total factor productivity. It is growth that cannot be explained by just capital inputs or labor inputs. It is growth that is due to better processes, better way of doing things, innovation, as the layman would call it. So that's the second period, 1997 to 2012. And then we are currently in the third period, I would say this is a period where we're still trying to amble for a more sustainable, productivity-driven growth model. I wouldn't say we have succeeded, but it is already producing slower growth. I mean, the government acknowledges finally that Singapore will be doing very well if it can sustain 2 to 3% growth a year. It is growth that is also a bit more equal compared to the 97 to 2012 period, where virtually every year we saw inequality creeping up, income inequality creeping up. In the last few years, income inequality has actually come down, especially if you take into account the effect of government taxes and transfers. The government has also acknowledged that the kind of foreign labour fueled growth for most of the 2000s is unsustainable, so it has taken quite significant steps to slow the rate of labour force increase. So those are the three periods, and towards the end we can talk about what kind of growth model we envisage for Singapore in this third period and going forward. So this is a quote right from the start. 1972, as you'll go on to see in my presentation, was a year of very important speeches, right? And the first of those was the global city. At a time when even the word globalization hasn't been invented yet, certainly the term global city hasn't come into popular usage. The first person who talked about Singapore as a global city was S. Rajaratnam. And he says this is Singapore's model, right? Economic, political model. By linking up with international and multinational corporations, Singapore not only becomes a component of the world economy, but is offered a shortcut. So he called our model of encouraging welcoming foreign multinationals to Singapore a shortcut. A shortcut to what? A shortcut to economic modernization, to development, to industrialization, right? To catch up or at least keep pace with the most advanced industrial and technological societies. By plugging in this way, we can achieve in 20 to 30 years what otherwise would have taken a century or more to achieve. And indeed, the Industrial Revolution, or the first and second Industrial Revolutions took about 200 years to achieve. At the end of the speech, he talked about, the first part of the speech was really talking about why it is essential, why it makes sense, why it is strategically crucial for Singapore to pursue this global city vision. But at the end of the speech, Rajaratnam was quite wise, right, and quite profound. He says, I've dealt largely with the economic aspects of Singapore as a global city, but the political, social, and cultural implications of being a global city are no less important, right? These political, social, cultural problems associated with being a global city, Rajaratnam believes would be far more difficult to tackle, and these may be the Achilles heel of emerging global cities. So if you, in the context of what Rajaratnam said, and you think about the kind of problems that we are having with too much foreign labour, the sense that this place has become very congested, competition for public goods, rising house prices. In a sense, you would say that Rajaratnam was very prescient that the political, social, and cultural problems start creeping in and start to undermine the economic results, economic fruits. They were extremely alive to the ideological and political currents in the world at that period, and this was a period of great, certainly for political leaders of newly independent, newly decolonized states. They were very alive to how should we organize ourselves, how should we govern ourselves. Should we be Fabian socialism? The PAP started out being a Fabian socialist party. When they make speeches like that, they were obviously these ideological political currents around the world greatly influenced their worldviews. And I'll go on to show.
And Dr. Goh actually went to the Youth Congress organized by the Soviet Union in Budapest, right?
If you did that, never mind.
But did you realize at the time when Rajaratnam spoke that pursuing this exclusively, to the detriment of the domestic economy, it was just going to, it's just going to exacerbate all the issues,
And I think as the 70s proceeded, I think they increasingly became sensitive to that. And later I'll go on to show you a speech by Goh Keng Swee, also in 1972. That's why I said 1972 was a year of incredible speeches.
Yeah, because it was actually almost the start of this foreign.
Indeed so. And even then, they already, Goh Keng Swee particularly said that there were limits to that strategy. There were limits to this MNC strategy. If you think about it, foreign capital and foreign labour are two sides of the same coin. Right? It is because we want to meet foreign capital's demands for ever expanding industrial needs and labour needs. That is why we had to increasingly open up our economy to foreign labour in the pursuit of growth, in the pursuit of this idea of being a global city. Right? So obviously we were very successful in the first 3 decades, as I mentioned, the first period. So what were the essential factors? Before we go on to talk about current conundrums, current contradictions, and current dilemmas, let's understand how we became so successful in the first instance. And I'll say essentially there were 3 reasons. The first, in common with South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and subsequently China, we pursued something called export-led industrialization, right? Against the conventional wisdom of the time. The conventional wisdom in the 60s and right up to the 70s was something called import substitution. Poor countries or developing countries were poor because we relied on rich countries for manufactured goods, for steel, for machinery, for cars, for vehicles. We will always be running current account deficits if we didn't industrialize. And so the way to industrialize, according to the import substitution theorists, in order to modernize our economies, we have to protect our domestic industries, shield them from foreign competition, right? Nurture our own infant industries.
Which India did a lot.
Which India did. Well, for that matter, the rest of Southeast Asia did. Thailand did it, Malaysia did it. I mean, Malaysia still to a large extent practices that. It's called proton. Well, I mean, then you say, well, why did Malaysia fail and South Korea succeed? Because South Korea didn't do what Singapore did. I mean, our shortcut to industrialization was MNCs. South Korea didn't do the shortcut. But South Korea, very wisely, when we will develop our own indigenous capabilities, we will create car companies, but we shall do it through export-led industrialization. We won't do import substitution. We will force the companies that the government was supporting, we will force them to export. If they didn't export, Park Chung-hee, the father of Korean industrialization, you'll be in trouble, or you might even be thrown in jail. Right? South Korea, like Taiwan, like Singapore, like Hong Kong, also pursued export-led industrialization. And it is so important that it's driven by exports, because if you didn't have exports, there's no way to discipline your firms. There's no way to discipline your firms. In our case, we were attracting MNCs. They were the ones that were helping us industrialize. And they, of course, they're not going to set up shop in Singapore to sell to Singaporeans. Right? This is a small market. Obviously, they were going to export. So in that sense, we had a natural export discipline. But for South Korea and Taiwan, this had to be imposed on their firms. If you didn't export, we were going to cut off government support. We were going to cut off subsidies and grants. Most other economies, India, Thailand, Malaysia, that pursued import substitution, what was lacking was what? They didn't have export discipline. Look at Proton, right? I mean, after 30 years as an infant industry, Proton is still an infant, right? It still needs government grants. Proton is successful in one economy in the world, Malaysia. Right? Why? Because all the other cars, imported cars, face high import tariffs. So if you're Malaysia, well, Proton is effectively heavily subsidized. And meanwhile, you contrast Proton with Hyundai, now the world's 5th largest car manufacturer. It started out being an infant industry, lots of government subsidy, lots of government protection, but always forced to export. So industrial policy can work if you have the right incentives, you have the right discipline, and I'll talk more about industrial policy later. But right from the bat, we had the right orientation. Right? We chose export-led industrialization, and Singapore was very lucky because at that time, the 60s, but that was the first phase of what became known as offshoring. Multinational firms looking for cheaper offshore locations to do their lower value-added activities. And if you go back to the 60s, which economies in the world were actually welcoming MNCs? Korea and Taiwan, not so much. It was only Singapore and Hong Kong. So we were very lucky. Today, of course, if I were to tell Bangladesh or Laos or Kazakhstan, right, go do export-led industrialization, they won't succeed as well as Singapore because China is doing it. Once China has done it, well, there are far fewer niches for you to fill. And so that's the first part. Let's take a step back. Why is industrialization so important? Industrialization is critical. I do not know of a country that went from developing status to a developed country status without going through an industrialization phase. With the exception of very small, oil-rich economies.
What about New Zealand?
New Zealand also industrialized. But New Zealand is a 3.5 million size economy. I think if you're anything more than 5 million, you have to industrialize. Even Singapore at that time, fewer than 2 million people, we also industrialized. And industrialization is critical for at least 3 reasons. One, it allows you to mitigate your lack of skilled workers through the use of easy-to-operate machinery. It allows you to raise labor productivity very quickly. If you didn't have manufacturing, you would have to rely on services. And services is a very large and diverse sector, right? There are high-end services, high productivity services such as banking, accounting, consulting, lawyering, right? But most of the other services are low productivity. Retail, F&B, cleaning, those are low productivity services. For a poor country, can you jump straight into high productivity services? You can't. You can't take an unskilled worker, put him in a bank and say, right, start servicing my clients. You can't take an uneducated worker, put him in an IT firm, which is high productivity services, and start writing code. You can't do that. They can't learn on the job. But with manufacturing, you can. You can, and in fact, effectively, that's what China has been doing for the last 30 years, until recently, right? Take farm workers, unskilled, uneducated, put them in a shop floor, give him some easy-to-operate machinery, and immediately his labor productivity shoots up, right? And that's how you industrialize. That's how economies develop. Right, so that's the first reason. Second, machines allow the manufacturing industry to scale up, much more so than services. Services tend to rely a lot less on machinery, and so they are therefore less amenable to rapid productivity growth. And third is trade. Trade in manufacturing, typically in any economy, is much larger than trade in services. And why is trade so important? Because trade enables learning. If people ask you about economic growth and what drives economic growth, your one-word answer is learning. Economic development is all about learning. If you're not learning new technologies, new skills, new tools, new ways of doing things, you're not growing. Right? And trade enables learning, right? So, which is another reason why Kazakhstan struggles. It's rich in resources, but relatively little trade, so relatively few learning opportunities. So that's the first reason. And these were the sectors that, right from the start, that Singapore relied heavily on in its early industrialization period. Textiles, of course there are no more textile firms. By the early 1970s, they all moved out of Singapore. They moved to Malaysia, to later on China and Vietnam. Consumer electronics and semiconductors, beginning in the early 70s, that's what we started to emphasize. And this point about consumer electronics best illustrates my point about learning, right? So what did we start producing in consumer electronics? Toys. Right, low value added toys. Just started assembling toys and radios. And your workers start doing that, right? Your unskilled workers, your uneducated workers start doing that. Then when you become too expensive, and Singapore became too expensive for toys, and the toy factories move out, what happens? Right? Your workers can now move on to do something else, right? They start producing TV sets. Right? When they become too expensive to make TV sets, they start producing computers, right? Computer screens, and then when they become too expensive for doing that, they start producing disk drives, and so on and so forth. So think of economic development as this giant ladder, and the way you climb that ladder is through learning. Right? And manufacturing, and particularly industries like electronics, are fantastic because they facilitate, they accelerate the learning process. Right? Companies, do not think of economic development or economic growth for that matter as, we just have to attract companies and keep them here. No, right? Once you understand that the secret to economic growth is learning, that learning happens through workers. Right? Firms come and go, right? If there's still textile firms in Singapore, that's it means our economy is in trouble. After 30 years, why are you still producing cheap textiles? So firms come and go, but what you want are the skills and the technologies. Right? So what you want from the MNCs is really technology transfer and skill transfer, at least for the first 30, 40 years of economic development. Semiconductors, which were very crucial in the 70s and 80s. Then shipbuilding and repair. Of course, in the case of shipbuilding and repair, it was not so much MNCs, it was our own firms, right? Keppel, Samcorp. Why did we have those capabilities? Because the British had left shipyards to us with shipbuilding capabilities. So think of economic development as all a case of accumulating capabilities, right? Accumulating domestic capabilities, and the way you do that is through learning. Just to reiterate King Soon's point, Singapore did not start with nothing. Right? We did have some initial strengths. What were they? Right? This was already a successful port, a very important entry port. Obviously, our geographic location played a part. We already, by the time we became independent, we already had existing oil refineries that laid the foundations for the petrochemical industry that was promoted and became very large, became a very important part of the Singapore economy from the late 1970s. Besides hard infrastructure, we had very good soft infrastructure, right? The fact that we are good in English, we have reasonably strong administrative capabilities in the government, a point that I will cover later, rule of law. And also, in the context of today's reaction against free trade, there was this strong conviction, right, that Singapore can only survive if we open up ourselves to free trade. Maybe there's too much free trade today. I mean, I wouldn't, that you can make an argument in that, but certainly in the 60s and 70s, free trade was a huge advantage to Singapore. So the idea is that Singapore wasn't a fishing village or soft time. We had existing strengths, we had existing capabilities, existing infrastructure that provided us a sound foundation for us to progress. The second important reason, besides export-led industrialization, was that we had good industrial policy. In contrast to Malaysia, in contrast to Thailand, certainly in contrast to Philippines and Indonesia, we had good industrial policy. We had a strong, it was not just export orientation, we also had strong state capacity. quite a disciplined and a relatively autonomous state, particularly a relatively autonomous EDB. What do I mean by autonomous? The opposite of autonomy or state autonomy is subordination. Subordination to what? Subordination to political interests, subordination to the interests of particular social classes or social groups. For the most part, our civil service wasn't subordinate. Right? It was relatively autonomous, especially the EDB, which meant that it could make decisions that were in the public interest, that advanced growth, that advanced development. They didn't feel that, oh, if a politician asked me to give certain tax grants or incentives to a particular company, I had to oblige. They didn't do that. Right? So they kept themselves apolitical or non-political, and they were, so the term that is often used is this idea of embedded autonomy. You want your industrial policy makers to be embedded and autonomous. Embedded means what? You must understand what's going on in industry. You must have business councils, industry councils, you must be in constant conversation with industry. And to a large extent, our EDB did that, and other parts of government too do that.
But what does industrial policy also cover? And that's the thing about the Singapore early period. There's nothing on local entrepreneurs, local business people to pursue the same industrial policy. And I think that's the missing link.
Indeed, so this is not my own view. This is based on research done by folks like Linda Lim, right? And her argument is that actually when we became independent, the government made a deliberate choice not to rely on local industrialists and businessmen. Why? Because they weren't sure that they could be counted on politically. A lot of the Chinese industrialists, weren't necessarily sympathetic to the PAP.
Why then did they not pursue the Korean way?
So that's a political economy question, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. But to himself was as dictatorial as these guys here.
Oh, much more.
Oh, even much more.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, blood and sense. And he was the one who basically seeded all these chaebols.
Yes, yes.
No, but they were existing companies already. Like Hyundai, the guy already had a construction company, so he was already successful. Then Park Chung-hee tapped him.
Right.
In our case, I don't think the ruling party trusted the local entrepreneurs between their loyalties between Singapore and Malaysia, because they had bigger interests at that time, say the OCBC family, in Malaysia compared to Singapore. So I think there's a lack of trust.
Yeah.
But there was a vibrant local
Yes,
industry around the Lee Industries, the Lee.
What, do you think the Lees were trusted?
Well,
I mean, this guy.
that's the
Because they
question.
had
You
bigger
see?
interests in Malaysia.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
and the Tankakis. And
Well,
all
do you
that.
think Tankaki was trusted?
Yeah, the citizenship withdrawn.
In other words, the DNA is there, but it was.
Yeah. So I would be the first person to say that, oh, we went with MNCs because there was no entrepreneurial talent in Singapore. That's complete myth.
Okay, yeah.
Right, that's complete rubbish. Right? So, and the same applies for the rest of Southeast Asia too. I mean, actually look at the rest of Southeast Asia, you say, hey, why don't we have, name me a single globally successful manufacturing Southeast Asian company. You can't name, right? Name me 5 from Korea. You can name plenty, right?
Even Taiwan?
Yeah, or Taiwan for that matter. Taiwan alone probably has more than Malaysia and Taiwan and
That's
Indonesia combined, right? But it's not for lack of entrepreneurial talent in Southeast Asia. It's just that these entrepreneurial talent were not tapped for manufacturing. And if you were an entrepreneur, if you were somebody with a spare few $100 million, why would you go into manufacturing? Manufacturing, the prospects of success are uncertain, right? You have to develop the skills, you have to acquire the learning, you need government support to at least protect you for a while, then you have to subject yourself to international competition. If you are an entrepreneur with a few $100 million to spare, where would you spend it? Real estate. Or if there's stuff to be dug off the ground, dig it from the ground. So all the entrepreneurs, all the tycoons in this part of the world, that's what they're in, real estate and natural resources.
Finance.
And finance, or they would have their own bank. Just go down to my city, right? I'm from Kuala Lumpur. Walk down Jalan Bukit Bintang and try to identify the provenance of each of the buildings there. All of the people who built those buildings got rich through real estate, casinos, mining, running power plants, right? The YTL family.
Yes.
Right? So it's not for lack of entrepreneurial ability. It's the fact that these entrepreneurs were not tapped by the state. The state did not leverage. The state did not force them to manufacture. While in Korea, in Japan, before Korea, South Korea, Taiwan, the state did that. Right? The state used it.
Local entrepreneurs in manufacturing. The auto companies, Toyota and Honda.
But were they manufacturing or just distribution?
They were manufacturing. They were actually becoming successful when Mahathir came out with this idea of Proton.
Yeah.
Then they were.
Yeah, in fact, that's the second reason why industrial policy in places like Malaysia failed, while in Korea succeeded. in most of Southeast Asia that did industrial policy, they didn't subject the firms they were supporting to competition. Like Hyundai, we think of Hyundai as very dominant in Korea, right? Indeed, it is the most successful, in fact, the only successful Korean car company. But when Hyundai started, it was never given a monopoly. It always had to compete with Daewoo, with SsangYong, with others. So it was only after the Asian financial crisis that the others couldn't survive. Hyundai emerged as the dominant player. But in Malaysia, Proton never had to compete. So they didn't have to compete for international exports, They didn't have to compete even domestically.
Yeah.
How do you discipline a firm like that? They only had carrots, no sticks. Right? As an economist, I say, if you're going to give a carrot, make sure you also have a stick in hand.
In fact, their competitors had their arms tied.
Their competitors had their arms tied. The competitors, the one had their hands chopped, right? So that's why industrial policy can work if you have export discipline and demanded high levels of domestic competition. Otherwise, if you gave them concessions, monopoly power, did not impose export discipline, what you end up with is a proton. Right? 30 years after infant industry promotion, it is still an infant. So the point I wanted to make about JTC, and then subsequently we had the JTC, which was spun out of EDB, and the JTC's role was to develop, customized, or not customized, but ready-to-use industrial parks. And Singapore was probably a pioneer in the world in say, if you're an investor, we'll prepare the land for you, right? With the amenities, with all the infrastructure ready for you to start operating and start producing. So the JTC. So the point I wanted to make about embedded autonomy is that our industrial policy makers must be embedded in, but not in bed with industry. If you're in bed with industry, it means you're captured, you're subordinate. Right? You're no longer doing things for the national interest. Talking about iron and steel mills, Korea has the second largest steel company in the world is Pohang Steel from Korea. When Korea wanted to produce steel, they went to World Bank for a loan. And the World Bank said, you don't produce iron, you don't produce coal, you don't have a comparative advantage in steel producing, so we will not provide you the loan. Korea went ahead to do it and produce. So this is what industrial policy can work. And a blind belief in neoclassical economics and in comparative advantage. You should only produce things you have natural advantages in. That will mean you're forever stuck doing what you're doing.